Okay, so we're back. From what I can tell, you should be able to hear me. Awesome. Okay, I finally got the audio working and there's no fuzz or anything. It's all clear. Awesome. Okay, it took me a while to get my OBS set up properly with my mic. But it seems to be good to go. So thanks for showing up. That's cool. Yeah, I guess I'll start. I guess I'll just go ahead and start. So I've got my software here that I'm doing my plan with. And if you're at all interested in using this software, I actually do have a whole tutorial on my channel from start to finish how to utilize this software. It's really cool. I've been using it for about 2 years now, and it's out of the UK. And so I'll go ahead and sign up. So they have the garden planner right now, and then the garden journal is going to be coming up in 2018. So I'm really in the spring of 2018. So I'm really excited. So you can do a free trial for 7 days, but then it's a software and then it's a subscription, and the subscription is $30 for a year, $45 for 2 years, and I got the 2-year subscription, and then I recently I recently re-signed up, basically renewed, I guess, my subscription for another 2 years. And the reason why it's good for 2 years is because, well, when I show you the garden, the way that you can plan it, it basically remembers where you had certain vegetables in what location the previous year, and so it's good for if you want to do crop rotation. So yeah, so it does have quite a database, so it takes a little bit of time to load up. But as you can see here, you can have a couple different plans, different years. Like I had my 2017 garden, my 2018 garden, and then because I'm still waiting on whether I can get a community garden plot here in Miramichi, I've got sort of just a couple ideas, but I'll go right here to my 2018 garden. And so you can see it gives you a grid, and then it has all kinds of options. First you would lay out where your garden is going, and you can use just like draw a line or a box, a rectangle, whatever. There's a whole bunch of options, and then there's these options for plants. And the neat thing about that is they're different sizes, and that's because it's showing you how much space each plant needs. So these are my gardens back at home at my parents' place. And this specifically are my back gardens, which are kind of behind my house, in between my house and my in the forest line. And so right here in this one area, I'm basically putting more and more perennials. So I have my rhubarb in my back. I have a couple herbs. I have an alpine strawberry, And then I have my Jerusalem artichokes. And then I've just been sprinkling a few things here. I'm planning for 2018 to put kohlrabi. This garlic has already been planted, and so according to the software, it says that you can fit 294 plants. I think my parents, because they were the ones who planted the garlic this past fall, I don't think they planted 290. I believe they planted around 160. Yeah, so the perennials are already there, and again, the nice thing about having this software for multiple years is that when you go to create a new plan for next year, the perennials will already be in that in the spot that they were in the previous plan. So yeah, I have my garlic. So here I'm planning on having my brassicas, and I'm planning on having basically hoop cover to protect from the cabbage moth, because the past couple years have been really bad for cabbage moth, and basically any cabbage or kale that I have ends up having so many holes in the leaves that it's kind of unappetizing to really want to eat. So I actually might not have broccoli under it, because you don't really need to protect broccoli from the cabbage moth, so I might do a little bit more cabbage. But the nice thing too about this hoop cover is that it extends the season, and so it allows you to have to plant the plants earlier in the season. Oh, nice. My the asparagus. I actually used to have the asparagus sort of in this area, and unfortunately, this whole garden is very much shaded because it's in between my house and the forest line. It gets maybe 4 to 5 hours of sun in a day, and so that means that the asparagus just wasn't getting a lot of sun, and so we moved it up to the front. But the plants that I have back here are doing quite well. For instance, the rhubarb does quite well in this location. I can get 2 to 3 harvests of rhubarb in a season, and those are big harvests of rhubarb. So the hoop that I have here, I mostly put it there in order to protect from the cabbage moth, which are, these white moths that fly around and lay their eggs on the underside of brassicas, which are broccoli, cabbage, kale, I think radishes too, and basically the eggs will hatch, and you'll end up with these little green worms that will munch on your leaves. And so it's not a big deal for broccoli or kohlrabi, because it's not the leaves that we're eating, but with kale and cabbage, it means that the leaves end up having these great big holes in them, and personally I'm kind of squeamish, so it just seems unappetizing to me when the leaves have a lot of holes in them. So that's mostly what the netting is for. But there is some interesting netting out there that I've found that does a dual purpose. It will protect from the cabbage moth while also extending the season and allowing us to plant earlier in the year. Wow, I've never actually had the problem with carrot tops, but definitely brassicas, yeah, definitely have a big problem. So I would encourage you to try the netting. Most people do keep the netting on all season. This will be my first year trying it, so I'm just sort of following everybody else's examples. But yeah, it's most people do keep it on, but I imagine you could take it off after moth season. Like I don't think that would be an issue. But yeah, so I have my currants, my Hascat berries, my gooseberries, and then some alpine strawberries sort of uh, intermingled. And then these fruit are my elderberries, just because I don't believe GrowVeg yet has a elderberry. Not quite. They have a lot of different fruits and vegetables, and even nuts. Excuse me, but there's still a couple obscure fruits that they don't have in an icon yet. So basically, this would be where my house is, because my trees are in the front. Yeah, that's definitely the way to go. The last few years, I've had this back garden for probably like 9 or 10 years now, and then I've had the front garden for the last maybe four, and I've had a lot of time to figure out what grows well in shadier areas, which is why I now largely have fruits and things like Jerusalem artichokes and rhubarb. Yeah, basically, my house is just here, and then my fruit bushes are in the front, just behind my front garden, which is close to the street. Um, So I have a dwarf apple tree, a dwarf cherry tree, and a dwarf plum tree, and those just went in this past spring. So in comparison, my fruit bushes have been in for a couple of years. My rhubarb has been in for I think 3 or 4 years. My asparagus, this will be its third year, I think. Oh, yeah, house is empty bit. Yeah, and so here in front of my this finally is my plan. Now I'm not sure. Now this is just a sort of this is a tentative plan because since I moved away in the summer, um, yeah. So I moved away in the summer, so my parents are largely going to be planting this. So I don't think that they will plant this entire plan, but I've given it to them as sort of a template. Um, the 3 beds. Well, so behind my house, these are 2 beds. One is a smaller one, and one is this bigger one, and they get a lot of shade. They get maybe 4 to 5 hours of really solid sun. I'd say at least four, actually. I'd say 4 hours of good sunlight around the middle of the day, and then otherwise they're in shade because of my house and the forest being on either side of the gardens. I think when I initially put my gardens in, I wasn't really thinking about the amount of sun that the gardens would be exposed to. I was mostly thinking about um, the just the space, because I didn't think I would want a garden right up near the street, since that might look odd. But eventually, when I put one up by the front street in order to get more sun, I ended up making like a raised bed with rock around it, so it actually looks kind of nice from the street. But yeah, so here next to my garden are I get containers. They aren't always here Sometimes they're sort of in the front of the garden here. But I have 6 fabric containers that my potatoes get planted in. And yeah, I've said it a couple times, but I much prefer container potatoes as opposed to having them in the ground. But yeah, so here in the back of my garden, I've got my trellises, and the reason they're in the back is because this side of the garden is the north side and this side is the south side, so I put my trellises in the back so that the plants that are climbing up the trellises won't end up shading out the rest of my garden. So yeah, so this is my whole plan, and I've got my beans. I've got Chinese mosaic beans here, which are a Asian long bean. I've got some cucumbers, my zucchini, and I really like my zucchini variety, which I ordered from Europe because it's a very rare vining zucchini. Most zucchinis that you find on the market now are bush zucchinis. This I'm thinking is going to be some kind of butternut squash or other winter squash. And then some purple potted beans, and then here I've sort of imagined that we might string up, put some string in between the sides of my trellises and then hang some string down and maybe put some peas at the bottom. I think some people find that string is actually really a good way for peas to be trellised. So here, I did put some corn, but again, I'm not sure if my parents are going to want to plant that corn. In the past few years, corn hasn't done very well, and it would cause a little bit of shade. I placed it in an area, so that it would hopefully cause the least amount of shade on my other plants, but it still might, so my parents might decide not to do that. Yeah, actually, when I ordered the seeds, I think I ordered them from Belgium. They were labeled as courgettes, so, but yeah, I think of it as zucchini. Yeah, and so I have my watermelon, cantaloupe here, and I was going to try some quinoa, but again, whether my parents end up doing the quinoa and corn, I'm not sure, but they'll probably do the watermelon and cantaloupe. And then here is, I was going to put some straight neck squash. Yeah, so the cucumber, beans, zucchini, and butternut squash are all on trellises. I actually built the trellises out of a wire that I got from a Tractor Supply, and it's sheep and goat fencing, and I made them so that they're about 6 feet high, I think. Which actually isn't nearly high enough. I mean, my plants always get to the top. And then I put the fencing in between 2 T-posts that I think are about 8 feet. So about 1.5 to 2 feet usually have to go into the ground in order for the trellis to be stable. So it ends up again being only about 6 feet tall, which really is because I was only able to find 8-foot T-posts. I wasn't able to find any taller T-posts than that. So yeah, so all these sort of structure here is supposed to resemble a trellis, I guess. So I have let's see, so I have a lot more blocks in this garden than in previous gardens, because I think in previous years I wanted to have more of a what we call it, a polyculture, where you would have a whole mess of different plants. But I realized that as much as I like that idea, it's much easier to harvest and maintain plants that are in blocks. So even though I have a couple blocks here of beets and parsnips in different locations, I put things in blocks just to make it a little easier on myself. Sweet corn and popcorn are different, well, different varieties. They're different varieties, and there's also another variety called flour corn. And if you go to rareseeds.com, which is where I get my seeds, it's a company in the US called Baker Creek, and you go under corn, they have a huge variety. And they'll, in their different descriptions, they'll say, you know, okay, this is good for flour, this is good for sweet corn, this is good for popcorn, and it all comes down to the different traits that the plants were selectively bred for. Like sweet corn, obviously, you want it to be nice and fresh and sweet, of course, but popcorn and flour corn, you really want to be able to dry them, and you want them to be nice and starchy, because of flour corn more so than popcorn. Really, you want to be starchy, but popcorn you want a little bit starchy too. Yeah, 6 foot seems really high, but I mean, we actually had tomato cages that I had made that I think were 6 to 7 feet tall, and our tomatoes grew even higher than that last year. So and then once that zucchini and cucumber starts climbing too, 6 feet really isn't that tall. So so I did put some pathways, and I mean, most gardens you're probably expecting to see rows because that's very neat and tidy, but I find that I want to grow the most food that I can in the space that I have, and so for that, I I want to try and maximize the growing space and minimize the amount of space for pathways, which is why instead of going with rows where I think there's a lot of space that's left without plants in it that you really don't need to walk in, instead of having that, I go with something like this where I try to put pathways in strategic locations, but ultimately I try to minimize the amount of space that's taken up by pathways. Cucumbers. I'm not familiar with a lot of bush varieties of cucumbers. You have mostly you have bush varieties for summer squash, zucchini, but cucumbers are often vining cucumbers. Although I think there may be the odd bush variety. So yeah, maybe you did have a bush variety. Um, it's also, as you said, it could have been just a weak plant. So I have my onions, my lettuce, parsnips, rutabaga, and I've also got in some locations, where did I put them? Oh, the cucumber. You saying it was a foot tall? Was that climbing up a trellis, or I'm not sure. I have some more kale here. Oh, okay. Um, Definitely it could be helpful to have more of a net type of setup, more of a trellis. And I've also found that, especially with beans, but a little bit with cucumbers too, if the trellis isn't low enough to the ground, then the plants won't reach for it. But if they can just touch it, then they'll actually be stimulated to grow more, just to be able to climb it. That's been my experience. I mean, I've had bean plants that haven't been able to reach the trellis, and they'll just stay maybe 10 inches tall, and it's almost like they've stopped growing because they have nothing to support them. One thing I definitely realize here is I probably need a better way of kind of publicizing my live streams. I mean, I scheduled them, and I put it on like my Facebook and my Instagram that I was going to do this, but I think I need a better way of getting it out to my subscribers that I'm going to have a live stream at a particular time. Where is my... For the kale here, I didn't put any hoops, and I thought that maybe I could do a bit of an experiment and have some kale that are under hoops and some kale that's not, and that way I can really see, what the difference is, and how just to really quantify what putting a hoop over it really does. I'm gonna see if I can get out to my Instagram that yeah, I definitely need to plan probably my live streams a little more in advance so that at the end of a particular video that I was doing, I can say, look, this is when the live stream is going to be. Yeah, that probably works because I don't think I can really have a schedule for live streams because I don't really have a set amount of topics to really talk about. With garlic, it's really hard to say, since you're in England, what to do with them, because with me in Canada, we actually plant our garlic in the fall. Usually a week or two before we expect the first frost. And so the garlic cloves will be dormant over the winter, and then as soon as the ground thaws, they immediately start growing, which allows us to harvest them around April, or not around April, around August. So I know that there are some culture or some climates where they will plant garlic right after winter, but for us that just doesn't work because it doesn't have enough time to grow to be able to harvest it before the next frost. So it's hard to say with your location whether you should be planting garlic in the spring or fall. Now, when you say that your cloves have started sprouting green shoots, is that are they planted or are they not planted? I'm not quite clear on that. Oh, so wait, so you're asking if they should be planted out. I mean, basically you can plant them. I would plant them as soon as the ground is really working or is really workable. So um, again, it's hard to say because I'm not familiar enough with that location to say. I mean, obviously garlic can withstand some frost. I mean, if we plant them in the fall, obviously it can withstand frost and winter and stuff, but I think once it's sprouted, ideally um, you don't really want it to get a hard frost anyway. Like once our garlic sprouts in the springtime, there still might be some light frosts that they'll get, and they'll be able to survive that. But I would recommend waiting until you think the hard frosts are gone. Like I don't know when your average last frost is in your area. For instance, us it's around May 15th or so. And so I would say, so if I were you in my location, I would not plant them until maybe the start of May. You can definitely pot them up indoors. That's totally a good plan. Especially it'll give them a nice little head start on growing, so that once you're closer to your last frost date, you can just transplant them and they'll continue growing. What I would recommend um, is maybe to plant a couple, say towards the end of March, and but keep some back, keep some in containers inside, and just see if the ones that you plant outside will will die, or what will happen to them. Just to kind of be conservative, right? Don't put all your garlic plants outside if you're not totally sure that they'll survive. And so it would be an interesting experiment too if you just put a couple. Yeah, for sure. Hedge your bets. But definitely, if you had some results on that, I'd love to to find out what happens, whether they survive or what happens with that. I'm really excited for the garlic at our house to start growing, because this will be the first year that we'll probably have the most garlic. I think my parents planted around 160 cloves at least. And so that's really cool. Hopefully it'll end up with enough garlic heads for um, for a whole year, and then enough to plant again for the next year. Yeah, so this will be probably my third year growing garlic. I remember the first year we really only planted two or three. No, I think we planted 10 garlic cloves, and about 6 came up in the springtime. And then then last year we had planted more, and how many did we plant? We probably planted something around 40 or 50, and they turned out well. And so this third year we went ahead and planted 160, and hopefully they'll all come up well. I know that like the week following when they were planted, they got a lot of rain, so I'm really hoping that none of them rotted in the ground. Preserve them in any special way. So garlic you can preserve just by drying. When you harvest them, you try to shake off all the dirt that you can, but you don't wash them. And then usually you'll tie a bunch of the stalks together and hang them from some area. I usually do hang them under my porch so that they're protected from any rain or any harsh sun, but there's also good air circulation, because then they'll dry well. And so you want to leave them there for about 2 weeks, and then after that you can take them down, cut the stalks off, cut the roots off, or cut the roots really short, get rid of more dirt, and then also you can, if the outer husk of the garlic is really dirty, you can remove that paper and throw that away, because there's usually enough paper layers covering the garlic that you can remove 1 or 2 without there being a problem. And then you just want to store them in a place where there's not a lot of light, and with good air circulation. So often they'll be in like a mesh bag in, say, a basement, and that's from what I've seen, that's been the preferred way. We haven't necessarily had enough garlic to really store it like that. We've only ever really had enough to have a few heads that we've just kept in our kitchen. So this year, if all my garlic comes up, it will be the first year where we'll really be tested on preserving the garlic long term. I don't know if you planted soft neck garlic or hard neck garlic. I planted hard neck garlic, and that's kind of a nice garlic to plant, because in the springtime it will actually send up a stalk that it'll eventually be the flower stalk, but you harvest it before it grows a flower, and that's called the scape. I don't know if you've ever had garlic scapes. I really enjoy them. I particularly like making pesto with them. I'll throw the garlic scapes, I'll chop them up and I'll throw them in a food processor with usually some Parmesan cheese, some olive oil, some basil. I also put in some nasturtium leaves for a nice little peppery kick. You could put in a little bit of lemon juice, you know, whatever you like in your pesto. But I really enjoy it. My parents, I think because in the past I've made the pesto really, really garlicky, my parents have not been so keen on it, but that just means that you want to put like more basil. You can also put radish greens in there because radish greens are edible. And so depending on how much garlic you like, might want to play with that, but I personally love garlic. So Parmesan cheese. I also sometimes put goat cheese in there, and then there's different nuts. Like a lot of classically they use uh, pine nuts, but I also use sunflower seeds. I find that effective. Yeah, scapes, SCAPES. Yes, that exactly. That's how you spell it, and they're garlic scapes, and you only get them from hardneck garlic, which is the heirloom garlic. Softneck garlic is what you'll find in the grocery store, and softneck garlic doesn't have a doesn't send up a flower like that, and so it's basically a long green. It just looks like a stem that shoots up, and at the end it'll usually have a little white bit, and you want to harvest the scape before that white bit gets very big. I'm going to, yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Pine nuts are so expensive. That's why I often use sunflower seeds, because to me it doesn't necessarily make that much of a difference. You could also use walnuts. Walnuts have a bit of a stronger flavor. So French. So if they're called French garlic, there is a good chance that they're hardneck. I've had a French variety, and I'm pretty sure they were a hardneck. So unless there's also a softneck variety called French, then it should be a hardneck variety. So in your video, actually, I watched your tiny house tour, and I saw a little bit of your front garden and then your back. Are all your vegetable plants in the front? I'm actually going to quickly grab some water. I should have had this with me initially. Because otherwise, my throat's getting a little dry. Okay, yeah. It looked good though in the yeah. So you said your back is shaded. Yeah, it's basically the same with me, which is why I made this huge garden in the front where there's a little more sun. Yeah, that's honeyberry, that's what it refers to, but it's also known as hascap berries. Um, this is a company out of the UK, so it may be that honeyberry is what the name is in the UK. So honeyberry or hascap berries are they're kind of like a berry that's almost, it's like a blueberry, except the shape of the berry is a little bit more elongated. Like rather than a sphere, it's almost like it almost looks like a pill, and it is a little more tart. And so often people will use hascap berries to make jams and jellies because you add that sugar to it, so it makes it a little sweeter. But it's nice, and it is very high in antioxidants, much higher in antioxidants than blueberries. Yeah, I have yet to really try making jam, but definitely it'll be something I'm interested in trying. Oh yeah, absolutely, it is a superfood. So because these are only a few years old, my Hatzcap berry plants haven't started producing yet, and my gooseberry plants haven't started producing yet. My currant plants have, although I actually, because I moved to Miramichi in June, I had seen flowers on my currant bush, but I hadn't seen fruit yet. And my parents, I remember I asked my parents about it, but they didn't end up seeing anything. So maybe the birds or some other animal got to the berries. But my elderberries back here, they can actually start producing the first year that they're planted, and so I actually got to see some berries, and the flowers that came before the berries, which are really tiny. I didn't expect them to be so tiny. I really like the Jerusalem artichokes. I don't know if you've had those before. They're a great plant. They're a little invasive, but I mean, since they produce food, that's actually kind of a cool thing. Um, I actually I posted my Jerusalem artichoke harvest like 1 or 2 months ago or so. Well, right now my elderberry bushes are tiny, so because I planted them like 2 or 3 years ago, so I think actually only two maybe, but yeah, so they're still pretty tiny. Definitely, I hope they get bigger. That'll be nice. Yeah, Jerusalem artichokes, the plants are a relative of sunchokes, or not, sorry, not sunchokes, sunflowers. Jerusalem artichokes are also called sunchokes because they're related to sunflowers. And so the plants get really big, even in the shady area here. These Jerusalem artichokes will get 9 feet or taller, so they get huge, and so the plants get really tall, and the Jerusalem artichokes are in the ground. They're a tuber like potatoes, and they're basically because they're rhizomes, because the plant spreads by the rhizome spread, and then the plant sprouts, and so they can be really invasive, but if you keep harvesting them, then they shouldn't be too much of an issue. But yeah, they're the taste of the Jerusalem artichoke. It's a little bit more crisp than a potato, and it's also, whereas potatoes have a lot of starch, The Jerusalem artichokes have a lot of inulin, which is a soluble fiber, so they're quite good for you. But they also mean that they can give you a lot of flatulence. So I've heard. So I've never actually had a problem, although I've only eaten them a couple times. But some people do. I guess it depends on your digestive system. So we had Jerusalem artichokes for Thanksgiving because I harvested them the weekend I was home for Thanksgiving, and I basically made a Jerusalem artichoke slash mashed potato mix where I steamed the Jerusalem artichokes and the potatoes, and I washed the Jerusalem artichokes, but I didn't really peel them. And so then I mashed them together. My mom wasn't a big fan. Excuse me. My mom wasn't a big fan, but I think it's because I used a lot of Jerusalem artichokes. I think the next time I make that, I'll probably want to have more potato than Jerusalem artichoke, but I still enjoyed it. But yeah, so it took me a while, but over a couple years, I sort of got the hang of learning about plants that do better in shadier areas. So some of these fruit bushes are definitely like that. And when you think about it, a lot of these fruit bushes grow natural on the forest floor. So of course, they're going to be adapted to not getting much in the way of sunlight. And then, yeah, Jerusalem artichokes do perfectly in this area. Like I said, I moved my asparagus because I found that whereas we were supposed to be able to get a good amount of asparagus in the third year, by the third year my asparagus was really kind of pathetic, and so I decided to go ahead and move it to the front where it would be sunnier. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with that. Yeah, I'm sure that would. I love parsnips, but I've never actually had mashed parsnips. I'm sure that would be tasty. And I've never had celeriac too. Oh, Good King Henry. So Good King Henry is another perennial, and it is how do I describe it? It's a plant that is actually, I think, native to this area, to like North America, and it's largely a leafy plant, and most people, I believe, eat the leaves. And I remember I got them from a plant sale once, and I can't remember if I've ever truly eaten the leaves. I might have taken a few and chopped them up and throw them in with a salad, but I couldn't really tell you what exactly it tasted like. It was just that when I go to different plant swaps and plant sales and I see something new, I'm always like, ooh, I want it because I love anything new and edible. So, but I've had to definitely cut down because in the past I've gotten herbs for that reason, and then I never actually use the herbs because I don't know how. So definitely I'm starting to very slowly only introduce one or two new things every year so that I can actually figure out how to use them. So I have to decide, I mean, what I maybe want to put here. The thing is, even though I measured the amount of space I had for my garden, and I think I put it properly, when I actually go out to my garden, it's not quite the same as this. Like the lemon balm tends to take up more space. The rhubarb and the garlic and the chives, I think, tend to take up much more space. So it's, I don't quite have this much space. Yeah, definitely. I mean, so many. There's this one person I know in who lives nearby my parents' place, and she's really cool. Like she's just a wealth of information about plants, but she always has these really unique, obscure perennial edible perennials, and um, and I remember she used to go to the farmers market that I frequented, and she would always have all these cool plants, and I would always buy a whole bunch of them, and I would spend so much money. And then I would grow the plants, and they would grow well, but I never really used them at all. Um, and some of them were perennials, but most of them were annuals. Like I did get the Jerusalem artichoke from her. I got the Good King Henry and the strawberry and the Alpine strawberry from her, but there's a whole bunch of plants that were annuals, and I just never used. Though I do know that there's one, she has buckler leaf sorrel that I really want, because when you chew on the leaf, it's very, very lemony, and I love strong lemon flavor. So in the past, I have grown parsnips. Last year, though, when I planted my garden, I threw a couple pumpkins in here, not thinking that they would do that well, and they ended up taking up my entire garden and shading out a lot of plants. So when I went and dug through and basically was ripping stuff out in the fall, I actually discovered some parsnips, and they were pretty small and thin, but it was still kind of a neat surprise to find them. Yeah, well, this is a so there's sorrel, which is a big, large leaf, and I'm told has a slight lemon flavor. But then there's another sorrel called buckler leaf sorrel, where the leaves are smaller, but they have a really intense lemon flavor, which is cool. Um, for some reason, my rutabaga didn't really do well. I had one rutabaga that tried to grow last year, but it just didn't. Um, and then my radishes, for whatever reason, didn't survive. My lovage here, it always gets huge, and I never use it. Yeah, buckler leaf sorrel. Let's see. Yeah, that's what it's called. Well, actually, rutabaga and turnip are different. What you might call rutabaga is Swede, Swede. My mom was actually born in England, and that's what they called it, Swede. But yeah, rutabaga and turnip are related, but they are different. Rutabaga usually gets quite large, and turnips, um, they can look similar. Yeah, Swede. That's what you guys call rutabaga. It's funny because my mom hates it, because when she was young, her parents used to make her eat it, and she couldn't stand it. Yeah, exactly. Rutabaga is larger and sweeter. So this will be my first year trying eggplant, and again, I don't know if my parents will necessarily grow it, but definitely if I get a plot at a community garden here, I'll be trying out eggplant. Oh, he didn't want it at all. Yeah, I think my mom just got sick of it or something, or maybe it was the texture, but she didn't like it at all. But I've been trying to get her to try it again, because the nice thing about rutabaga is they get so large that in terms of maximizing how much food you can grow out of a garden, like they're a great option, because you can maybe get one and then you can cut it up, slice it up and freeze it and have, have it for stews or soups or whatever. Oh yeah, darn. That's too bad. Yeah, this will be my first year trying to grow eggplant. Um, but I've had so many failures, like my onions. I've tried onions twice so far from seed. They just haven't succeeded. But again, like last year, I mentioned my pumpkins really went wild, and especially the fact that I wasn't there, like my parents were maintaining it. Excuse me. They A lot of the other plants unfortunately suffered, so I'm hoping that this year it'll be better. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm interested in doing rutabaga like that. I'm, One of the inspirations to me is a YouTube channel called 50 Ducks in a Hot Tub. And what I love is that he started a garden in, I think, 2011, and he did a whole vlog series of all through the gardens, or all through the season of what was happening in his garden. And I think he said it was like mid through July that he and his wife stopped eating grocery vegetables from the grocery store, and he hasn't eaten vegetables from the grocery store since then. um yeah, 50 ducks in a hot tub, and he's actually located not too far from my parents' place. And so, that's kind of cool, because it kind of shows what I'm capable of doing in my climate. And but yeah, ever since I think it was like July 2011, he hasn't eaten vegetables out from the grocery store, because he's grown enough in the garden for the summer, and then he's also grown enough to store for the winter. And he has this big flash freezer that he'll flash freeze all his vegetables and put them in bags in the freezer and have them for all through the winter. Well, yeah, he also has ducks. So he eats like duck and other vegetables. I definitely want to have big garden, but also a couple animals. I would love ducks, because I am actually allergic to chicken eggs, so I eat duck eggs, and I also like the meat duck. So, but I'm thinking I'd also love maybe a couple goats, um, and for some milk, maybe a small cow. You know, and definitely am interested in an acreage. You could almost say that this whole garden is really like a trial run for that, for when I eventually get my acreage. I mean, where I'm sort of going ahead and failing and learning all that I can with this garden, so that once I have my acreage and I, really start wanting to rely on my garden for my food, I'll actually have a good amount of knowledge built up. Yeah, exactly. 50 ducks in a hot tub. That's the one. And right now he mostly does duck videos, because that's been his focus. I think this past summer wasn't very good for gardening, so he never got the garden in. If I remember correctly, around the time that you would have normally planted a garden was when our location got a ton of rain. So in addition to the snow melting, there was all this rain which caused some flooding and just meant that it really wasn't good for growing any food. So I think he got caught in that, and that's why he didn't do a garden. But if you go onto his page, he has all his playlists, and he has some playlists for like his 2011 heirloom garden, 2012 heirloom garden, 2013, and I think he has a 2014, 2015, and maybe 2016 too. Yeah, I find it really inspirational because he grows like an amazing amount of food. The What I found amazing was with rutabaga. He's gotten these huge rutabagas. Like one was I think 14 pounds, and that was just so crazy. The beets, he always has so many beets that he ends up giving a certain amount of beets to the ducks to eat. Because he likes a lot of beet greens, but he doesn't necessarily eat a huge amount of beets, and he always gets over 100 pounds of beets from his garden. So I hope to one day have a similar type garden. Oh, Justin Rhodes, yeah, I've heard a bit of him. I've seen some stuff from him, but yeah, I haven't. I definitely need to check out more. Um, I listen to a lot of podcasts from the sort of sustainable ag, permaculture type of community, and he's been on a few of those. Another good one is Curtis Stone, who is in British Columbia, Canada, and he does suburban agriculture or urban agriculture actually, where he grows. People can volunteer to give him their yard, and he'll use it to grow food. In exchange, he'll give them kind of like a CSA box. But he also grows food for restaurants, and does quite well for himself. Makes a good living actually. So yeah. So yeah, I hope to at one point be able to do that, and hopefully this year. And unfortunately, it's looking like I will be in Miramichi. I won't be back in Ottawa, so I won't be able to be with this garden for probably most of the season. But my parents are going to take care of it. My dad is really kind of enjoying the gardening. I mean, he's not crazy about weeding and everything, but he enjoys, the results of being able to harvest food. And so, I think he's going to really make an effort to plant out. Yeah, yeah, I know he's on YouTube. I haven't actually seen many of his videos. I was listening to a podcast which would interview him. It's called Permaculture Voices, and the guy Diego did an interview with Curtis, where the whole series basically, where he interviewed Curtis, I think probably once a week or so for like the whole season. And it was just really cool to listen to what he had to say. So what else are you planning to grow in your garden? I know you said you had garlic and What else? And are you gonna try eggplants again? So this kind of gives you an idea of what my garden looked like last year, or what I tried to do last year anyway. Actually, they with asparagus, they advise that you wait till the third year to really because what you want to do is um, you want the asparagus to really get established, and in order to so that in the future you can get a lot of asparagus. So at least what I've heard anyway in my location is to always leave the asparagus till about its third year to really harvest. Yeah, the pathways. I think what must happen when I have my when I open up um, my new plan is the pathways and such must kind of move over to the new plan and be taken away from the old plan. But yeah, so this was what I had for last year. Definitely didn't end up being quite like this. I mean, I did have my pumpkin and my cantaloupe here. My cantaloupe, I think, I think died, but my pumpkins went crazy. Excuse me. My tomatoes here did pretty well. My tomatoes here did pretty well. Um, and well, my tomatoes here and here did well as well. Um, my broccoli did okay. I didn't have corn or rutabaga here. I had some peppers. The peppers were good. None of my onions really succeeded. Bush tomato. Well, so you have indeterminate tomatoes or determinate tomatoes. And so indeterminate tomatoes are the tomatoes that tend to vine up, and so you want to provide them with a trellis, and they'll continue to, or a cage, and they'll continue to grow really tall. But determinate tomatoes are more what you might be thinking of when you think of bush tomatoes, I think, because they tend to only get a certain size, and then instead of continuing to produce tomatoes throughout the season, they will basically produce a whole bunch of tomatoes at a set time, and then they'll be done. So that's why, for instance, a lot of commercial growers will use determinate tomatoes, because that way they're able to harvest all the tomatoes at a particular time. So I don't grow determinate tomatoes just because I do want to maximize the amount of food I can get out of a particular uh, space. I prefer to grow indeterminate tomatoes because they'll continue to produce tomatoes throughout the season. Yeah, yeah, they all fruit and ripen all at once, exactly. That's a determinate tomato variety. And so, I mean, if you like that, certainly that's good. I'm sure it's good for canning if you like to can your own sauce and stuff. But I just prefer to have them kind of fruit and ripen gradually throughout the season, because usually I find you typically get more that way. And it's also, because I'm not usually storing mine, I tend to like getting it throughout the season as opposed to just once. So, unfortunately, watermelons didn't really succeed at all. Cucumbers didn't really succeed at all. Some beans did okay. And the cabbage didn't succeed at all. I didn't end up planting sunflower. Okra didn't succeed at all. A lot of my plants, unfortunately, I didn't really harden off well, so that's definitely something to improve upon this year. They were purple potted beans, which they were a pole bean, which means that they climb up a trellis as opposed to just a bush bean, and they were purple. But what happened is if you steam them or cook them, they would end up turning from purple to green. Okra, yeah, okra definitely it grows well in the southern United States. So far I've tried to grow it with very little success, but I've also thought that maybe it's because of other factors. For instance, maybe my soil fertility wasn't good. In the case of last year, my pumpkins took over and shaded out a lot of my plants. So I'm definitely going to continue to try okra a few more times before I give up on it. Let's see, where's my other... So I did set up this possible community garden plot. Again, I don't actually know if I got one, how big it would be. I think I thought maybe it would be 8 feet by 15 feet. That's just a guess on my part from looking at like different community gardens and what they have to offer, but this was me just playing around with deciding what I want. That I probably would want. I don't know, maybe I'd probably have less cucumbers than maybe a zucchini plant, because I actually prefer zucchinis. Yeah, basically a community garden is like an allotment. Except definitely from what I can see from different YouTube channels that show an allotment, you guys have really, really big allotments. I mean, I've seen community gardens here with decently sized plots, but they definitely aren't quite as big. Yeah, I've heard that. Here it seems to be less of a waiting list, although it also depends on where you are. Like for instance, if you were in Toronto, you probably have to wait longer than here in Miramichi, which is a small town. I'm next Monday actually. I'm going to go to a meeting for the community gardens. Right now, there's one that's basically on the property of a church, and then there's another one that they're going to be putting together this year because the city has apparently given them one of the parks to turn into a community garden. So when I meet with them, I'll probably, offer to help with that, because I'm happy to help develop a new community garden. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, in Canada, certainly, we have a lot of space available to us. Um, but yeah, I'm hopeful that I'll be able to get a good plot here. I would definitely be disappointed if I went the whole summer without being able to plant anything. So yeah, so this is my idea. it also may be that the I'm not sure, it could be, 15, 10, but let's say I have 10 by 20. Because I think 8 by 15 is actually kind of small. Like, I think a lot of the community gardens here have bigger spaces, so I'm probably going to I might put that at, maybe I'll do 15 by 15. So I mean, again, this is just me guessing, but so if this was south, then I'd probably want to put a trellis probably maybe have the 2 watermelons. But you can kind of get an idea of how this program works. It's pretty cool. So, whereas this one takes up about 6 square feet. Yeah, that's pretty big. I think that's probably what I would end up getting. Yeah, it is square feet. I'm sure that you would be able to, so you can change it from feet and inches to metric. So I don't know if that's what you guys use over there. I personally, but yeah, if I did metric, then it would be, 6.09 meters, 6.09 meters. If I had more space, I would definitely want more tomatoes. Yeah, Canada is kind of the same way. I mean, we use feet but then we use centimeters, for instance, when talking about the amount of snow that we get. Although occasionally we'll go between centimeters and inches depending on how much snow there is. But sometimes millimeters of rain, or and then the temperature is kind of weird, because when we're talking about setting the oven to a particular temperature, we talk about Fahrenheit. But then if we're talking about weather in terms of the temperature outside, then we're talking Celsius. And so it's really kind of odd, the mixture of stuff that we have in Canada. Okay. I find that we still use pounds in cooking. Um, but I mean, not. So we drive in kilometers. Yeah, so we drive in kilometers. A person is measured in feet and inches. Houses are measured in feet. Um, Weight is pounds for people. Um, but when we're cooking, I don't know that we measure weight that much when we're cooking. Mostly use like teaspoons and tablespoons and stuff. Money. How's money metric though? I don't. And I'm also curious. Isn't like maybe this is sort of going out of style, but um, isn't it weight? Isn't there a stone? It's like you can say stones. Someone is like 3 stone or something. I heard that that's kind of a European thing. Let's see. So I'd probably only do 4 cherry tomatoes, I think, because, and I'd do some good amount of basil. I definitely need to do some peppers though. Or peppers, chili peppers. Huh, that's odd. I guess, yeah, that's odd. So what is a stone then? Like, for instance, how many pounds are in a stone? I don't, like, I'm not familiar with that kind of term. Okay, so one is 14 pounds. So I like to put some flowers in between, like all my plants, flowers and herbs, because I find, flowers can attract certain pollinators, and they can also sometimes, the smell of certain flowers and herbs can deter different pests. So what else do I want? Oh, I was going to put cantaloupe at some area. Maybe I'll put it here. Oh, okay. Nobody nobody uses sort of pounds when it comes to like a heavy weight. It's interesting. Now what do I want to do cabbage? Yeah, I think I'll do some cabbage. I did some cucumbers. I think I want to do oh, okay. Metric ton, yeah. Let's see, what do I want? So we've got watermelon. Oh, I do want to do eggplant. Can I put eggplant here? Yes, I can. So that is a line of marigolds. So yeah, again, I like to put marigolds around because they're good for pollinators. They're good for deterring some pests. I mean, I don't know. My mom always told me that they were good for deterring like chipmunks and stuff. I don't know how true that is. It could be like an old wives' tale. But I tend to like to put them around anyway. I'll probably put some nasturtiums too. And what's kind of neat is if you like the idea of doing companion planting, you can click on this. You click that heart button here, and it shows up with stuff that is good for companion planting. Let's see. Might do some borage. Now what do I want? I do only have 8 kale plants. Do I want? Yeah, I really like that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here. Like you can go to all plants, or you can filter down to vegetables, and there's the different and then there's like fruit and nuts. If I take an almond tree, like look how big that is. That would take up my entire spot. You can, and then there's also, you can go to structures. So if I wanted to put, say, an arbor or maybe an arch, I could put that here. I could do that arch for my cucumbers. You can even, if you're doing like your backyard, you could put like a little chicken coop here. Say you were keeping chickens alongside your garden, or maybe even a beehive. So it's pretty cool. It's like, and they keep sort of adding different options as it goes along, which is pretty neat. I mean, definitely if you're looking to like save money, I understand that like $30 a year, $45 for 2 years is probably like a serious consideration, but honestly I think it's worth it, because it just helps you really understand how to maximize the amount of food that you can get from your square footage, and so I think that's really valuable. You can put your cold frame, you can put a compost bin. Like if I put a compost bin here, well, it might be good to check that out. Like check out your deed, or check out the I don't know if you have bylaws for your city. Like in Canada, we have bylaws for the city, which is basically regulations. But check whatever kind of regulations and see what you're allowed, because certainly where I am in Miramichi, the city will allow us to have up to three chickens or ducks in a backyard, like within the city. So definitely, if I get a property here, I'm certainly interested. But some places will let you have bees too. Oh, so on the allotment, that's interesting. I'm sort of like, I've seen in YouTube videos, I've seen different people's allotments, and like I see that it's a big garden, but I'm never quite sure if there's like other space, if they had space to keep a chicken house too. That's interesting. Here there's also the option to put irrigation, which is pretty cool, to lay out your irrigation. I actually don't have any broccoli yet. Maybe I'll put broccoli. That makes sense, yeah. What else do I want? I'll probably do a little bit of lettuce. Here we go. And now I would probably, it might be interesting having to sort of get in there. I'd probably have to walk around my plants, but I'm sure I'd figure something out. Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I definitely at one point would love maybe a couple chickens, and a lot of chickens, mostly ducks, because I am allergic to chicken eggs. But I probably might keep chickens for meat if I had an acreage outside the city. But I'd also have some ducks, and probably some rabbits would be good too. Anyway, so I've kind of gone through most of my plans. So, I mean, it was nice talking to you, but I think we'll probably call it an end. Birds with white. Wow, 7 acres. That's pretty cool. But yeah, thanks for joining me on or on this live stream. I'm definitely going to have to do a bit more to publicize my live streams in the future. You're welcome. Yeah, I'm great. I'm glad I could give you some advice. So thanks for coming, and I hope your garden turns out really well. I'll definitely be checking your channel to see how your garden does this in 2018. So have a good night.